July 19th, 2025. The Czech Grand Prix sprint at Brno. The starting grid is screaming with deafening engine noise, vibrations rattling through the carbon fiber. On live television, a thin sheet of plastic drifts across the hot asphalt and lands directly inside a painted grid slot. Not an empty space. It lodges squarely beneath the rear tire of Marc Marquez. You're sitting on a prototype motorcycle. The clutch is biting. The red lights are lit. The launch control is perfectly calibrated. And suddenly, your traction is gone. The onboard camera captured Alex staring down, frantically trying to kick the debris away as the seconds bled out. And that discarded visor tear-off came from Marc Marquez, compromising his own brother's race before the launch even happened. Marc Marquez detonated his own brother's race before the launch even happened. Done. Over. How does a multi-million-dollar operation crumble over a piece of trash? The Paddock PR machine spun this as a freak gust of wind. A bad break. Don't buy that comfortable lie. This wasn't an accident of nature. This physical intrusion was the exact manifestation of the most suffocating psychological hierarchy in world motorsport. An environment that eventually fractured an entire garage, forced doctors into an unprecedented standoff, and shattered a family dynasty. We're tearing up the official press releases today. The official narrative filed that Brno incident entirely under bad luck. You saw the devastating result on screen. A MotoGP rear tire operates on millimeter-perfect temperature windows. Introducing a foreign object between the rubber and the track surface destroys the friction coefficient instantly. That small piece of plastic annihilated Alex's rear grip. He suffered huge, uncontrollable wheel spin off the line. He plummeted straight down the order and finished in 17th place. One of his most frustrating results of the entire season. Ruined by friendly fire. But treating this as an isolated mishap ignores the harsh reality of the racing ecosystem. When you share a garage with an apex predator, you don't get equal status. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You exist purely as collateral damage in their relentless pursuit of total dominance, caught in the undertow of their ambition. Every piece of data, every ounce of engineering focus, and every strategic decision orbits around one side of the box. And that underlying structural dynamic set off a vicious chain reaction of corporate mutinies and outright defiance that reached its breaking point just months later. The factory desperately tried to keep a lid on the escalating tension. They deployed their media managers to smooth over the cracks. They failed utterly. The pressure cooker exploded over a stealth confrontation. November the 18th, 2025. The postseason Valencia test. This is the window where factories debut their prototype chassis for the upcoming year. Millions of dollars of development depend on rider feedback during these exact sessions. And this is where the health establishment attempted to assert dominance over a rider who recognizes zero authority. MotoGP doctors looked Marc Marquez in the eye and issued a formal ultimatum following a shoulder injury. They told a reigning world champion he could only participate if he explicitly promised not to crash. Think about that for a second. What were they expecting? You don't ask a prototype motorcycle racer to sign a behavioral safety contract. You don't ask someone whose entire legacy is built on finding the very limit of physics to just ride carefully. The request itself demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the athlete. Marc looked right back at those safety officials and flatly rejected their terms. The rider refused to compete under those restrictions. The Spaniard told them directly, without hesitation, that he can't ride a bike without thinking about crashing. Marc defied the experts, walked away, and showed the entire paddock who actually dictates the rules. The medical staff lost their leverage instantly. The champion humiliated their protocol and exposed the illusion of control the championship organizers thought they possessed. So how did a factory structure lose absolute control of its star riders? Subscribe to this channel right now, and you'll start noticing how many of these internal power struggles happen right under your nose while the broadcasters just talk about tire pressure. That health standoff in Valencia was merely a preview of the brutal physical carnage waiting in May 2026. The French Grand Prix sprint at Le Mans. Marc crashes violently. That impact fractures the 5th metatarsal in his right foot. A broken foot is standard damage in this sport. Riders tape it up and race. But the foot was just a convenient cover story for a grimmer reality hiding higher up. A loose screw from a 2019 shoulder surgery had shifted deep inside his shoulder after a previous wreck. It was aggressively compressing his radial nerve. He was losing feeling in his right arm. A MotoGP bike requires microscopic throttle control to prevent a fatal high side. Braking forces alone exceed 1.5 Gs, straining every muscle in a rider's upper body. You can't bluff your way through a 200-mile-per-hour braking zone when your sensory input is failing. He was operating this machinery with a deadening hand, so on May 10th, he flew straight to Madrid for an urgent operation. Specialists stabilized the fractured foot and dug out those shifting bone fragments before they ended his career permanently. The stakes were fatal. Official channels focused on the foot because it sounded manageable. Management buried the nerve damage reports because nerve damage ends careers instantly. Meanwhile, in Barcelona, his brother was experiencing a totally different kind of destruction. May 17th, 2026, the Catalan Grand Prix. The main straight is one of the fastest stretches of asphalt on the calendar. Pedro Acosta suffers a catastrophic mechanical failure. His KTM stalls dead on the racing line. A 200-pound metal roadblock sitting entirely still while the rest of the pack approaches at terminal velocity. Tucking deeply into the slipstream at terminal velocity leaves almost zero forward reaction time. By the time Alex saw the stationary KTM, the physics of the crash were already locked in. Alex hits it. That collision is sickening. Kinetic energy transfer causes a marginal fracture of Alex's C7 cervical vertebra. It breaks his right collarbone. 4. A broken neck and a pulverized shoulder from a single violent impact. The human body is simply not designed to absorb that level of sudden deceleration. Gresini released standard statements praising his determination and outlining recovery timelines. Empty corporate noise. The reality was a rider physically broken by machinery that fails at the most lethal possible moments. Management was now dealing with two mangled bodies simultaneously. They were staring down a heavy points deficit and a medical bill that defied human endurance. And this is where the Gresini management structure fully collapsed. 1 month later. The Czech Grand Prix in Brno. June 19th to 21st, 2026. Alex attempts a comeback that defies basic human biology. The elevation changes and heavy braking zones of Brno exert immense gravitational force on a rider's neck. Somehow, the rider secures the health clearance anyway. MotoGP Chief Doctor Dr. Angel Chart signs the paperwork, officially clearing a man with a recently broken neck to run Free Practice 1. Alex straps in, blocks out the trauma, and qualifies 14th. The number 73 was less than a tenth of a second away from advancing to Q2. Alex had the raw pace. This pace proved the experts right. But the very next morning, on June 20th, he withdraws from the rest of the weekend entirely. Why would a racer walk away from a cleared grid spot? The official press releases cited recovery management and precaution. Total garbage. The telemetry proved he was fast enough to fight for points. The problem wasn't the stopwatch. You don't put on a leather suit, risk paralysis, miss Q2 by milliseconds, and then voluntarily quit because you feel tired. A racer's default state is denial. Something external forced his hand. The problem was happening behind closed doors inside the team truck. Who makes that kind of choice? If this breakdown of the comfortable narrative is hitting different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this to more people who need to see the facts behind the sanitized press releases. You have to examine the exact words Alex used when the microphones were pushed in his face. Alex didn't say his neck failed him under braking. He didn't say the pain was unmanageable. Instead, he stated verbatim, "The team were pushing me to stop more than me. The team were pushing me to stop." This isn't standard safety protocol. It's an intervention. This is a garage looking at their data, looking at a rider with a recently broken neck, and forcefully pulling the plug against his will. The rider desperately wanted to race. He had the speed to justify it. The management laid hands on the operation and shut it down. They intervened because the liability of a secondary impact on that specific cervical vertebra was too severe to ignore. The trust between the rider and the pit box evaporated in that exact moment. When your own crew, chief, and team manager advise you to step away from the bike after qualifying, the psychological bond is tested. A team is supposed to fuel a rider's belief. Instead, they acted as his warden. They saved his life, but they destroyed his faith in their shared mission. And why was Alex pushing his broken body so desperately through the pain? Because the standard on the other side of the garage is mathematically impossible to live up to. By July 12th, 2026, Marc had recovered from the Madrid operation and arrived at the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring. The anti-clockwise layout favored his riding style, but the stakes were monstrous. The Spaniard was trailing championship leader Marco Bezzecchi by 102 points after Mugello. A miracle was required to save his season, and the veteran delivered one. The number 93 machine dominated the race. The elder Marquez matched Giacomo Agostini's historic record of 10 Premier Class wins at a single circuit. 10. Decades of racing history equaled in one afternoon. Agostini set records in an era where the mechanical advantage was vastly different, riding machines that looked prehistoric compared to modern prototypes. Doing it today, against a grid separated by tenths of a second, requires a level of ruthlessness that can't be taught. And Alex? On lap 9 of that exact same race, while actively chasing Marc for the lead, he pushed over the absolute limit and crashed out of second place. The contrast was violently clear. One brother makes history while defying health logic. The other ends up in the gravel trying to catch a ghost. Alex was staring directly at that ruthlessness, and his front tire simply washed away under the pressure. Which brings us to the permanent fracture confirmed today. August 26th, 2026. The breaking news that fundamentally rewrites the entire grid structure. The 2027 rider market reshuffle is reaching a fever pitch with major key transfers confirmed. Alex Marquez is leaving Gresini. He's abandoning the Ducati machinery entirely to join the factory Red Bull KTM team. This isn't a standard contract negotiation. This is an escape route. The brotherly alliance is officially over. Marc remains permanently tied to the factory Ducati Lenovo team through 2028. The shared garage is dead. The factory tried to manage two entirely different trajectories under one roof, and it resulted in a total collapse of their operational harmony. They're now corporate enemies. KTM bought a fast rider, and they also gained an insider. They weaponized the sibling rivalry to acquire the missing pieces of their championship puzzle. When you sever a family tie in this sport, it echoes through every department. Ducati thought they could retain the loyalty of both men. They underestimated the psychological toll of the hierarchy. Alex realized that as long as he wore the same colors as the man who threw that tear off, he would never be the priority. You have to understand the macro-level paddock stakes of this KTM move. For years, the story sold to the public was unity. Two brothers taking on the world together. The reality was a pressure cooker that broke bodies and strained professional relationships beyond repair. When Alex leaves for KTM, he takes years of intimate Ducati telemetry and operational data straight to their biggest Austrian rival. He's taking the internal secrets of the Marquez dominance and handing them to the competition just as the new 850cc engine regulations approach. This upcoming technical reset is a multi-million-dollar arms race. Ducati versus KTM versus Aprilia. Data is the top currency in modern racing, determining who stands on the podium and who gets left behind. Aerodynamic dependency changes entirely. Whoever builds the best baseline chassis wins the next decade. KTM now has the exact blueprint of what Ducati does right, sourced directly from the rider who experienced these garage dynamics firsthand. This is corporate espionage authorized by a contract signature. Meanwhile, Marc is left to carry the entire Lenovo Ducati expectation on his surgically repaired shoulders. That power dynamic has permanently shifted. The factory tried to dictate safety terms to a champion. Management tried to control the comeback narratives of a broken rider. Executives tried to smooth over a piece of plastic that ruined a race. And the result was total institutional failure. The doctors were ignored. The garage was divided. The secrets are compromised. The comfortable lie is that this is just business as usual in the Premier class. In reality, a rogue piece of debris exposed a structural imbalance that eventually tore a dynasty apart. They made the choice. They knew exactly what they were doing. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.